We often assume that when someone is in need or is hurting, that they'll tell us, yell at us about it, or maybe even scream until they're heard. But the truth is that for many of us, speaking up about how we feel either wasn't safe to do or we weren't ever shown how to do it. Therefore, we act in ways that we hope will get people to finally see just how much pain we're in. In other words, we silently scream. That's what I want to talk about today, silent screaming. What is it? Why do we do it? And what are the 6 signs that it's already happening in our life? Silent screaming is when we are in so much physical or emotional pain, but we don't know how to communicate it. So we find other less direct ways of expressing our upset in the hopes that someone will pick up on our cues and respond accordingly. Unfortunately, acting in this way doesn't always work and can cause us to feel isolated, misunderstood, and sometimes even more upset. But the reason that we act this way isn't because we prefer having people guess how we're feeling. It's actually because we often don't know how we feel. I remember when I was writing my first book, Are You Okay? And I reached out to some friends and family to ask them if they could write out 5 feelings they had that day. And only my mom's boyfriend, Larry, could do it. I was shocked, but that only goes to show just how disconnected we often are. And if we aren't in touch with how we're feeling or what we're going through, how can we tell someone else about it, right? This also happens because it may not have been safe to express our feelings in our home growing up. We could have been harmed for speaking up, or even told to shut up or go to our room, or even felt like it was too much to put onto our parents because we felt responsible for their emotional state. So we learned to stuff it down and just hope that the feelings went away. We could also act in this way because no one ever showed us what it was like to speak up. Maybe our family never talked about the hard stuff and insisted that we always pretend everything's okay. Now, I know that when I was growing up, no one really ever fought around me. And so I didn't know how to deal with any anger that I felt. It was so scary. And I remember just assuming and telling my therapist that I felt like it was out of control. And I was shocked when my therapist asked me about that and explained how important it is for children to see their parents argue about an issue and then make up. That we need to learn through watching how our family members interact with each other. So if you never saw anyone in your household speak up, express an upset, or get mad, then you might not know how to do it. But we can learn, which is what I'm going to get into in just a minute. Now that we know what silent screaming is and the reasons that we can do it, let's get into the 6 signs that silent screaming is happening in your life. Number 1 is being passive aggressive. This means that instead of speaking directly to someone about our wants, needs, or upsets, we hope that they'll understand by our indirect actions. A good way to know that we're being passive aggressive is when we want the person to hear and respond to the thing that we're saying without us actually having to say it. And this could play out as us giving someone the silent treatment, deliberately not doing something that we told them we would do, saying we're fine when we're not. We could show up late for functions, purposefully make them late for something they want to go to, or sabotage something we know is important to them. Being passive-aggressive is not healthy for any relationship, but also know that it's incredibly common. I honestly don't think that you could find someone who hasn't acted this way at least once in their life. So show yourself a little bit of compassion, but also know that continuing to act this way is damaging, not only to us, but to our connections with others. One of the ways I try to combat my own urge to be passive-aggressive is to journal about how I'm feeling. This helps me see what's really going on, why I'm upset, and who I need to talk to. The thing that makes this an easy first step is that I don't have to tell anyone yet. I'm just writing it down, trying to better understand it. And then I can choose how I want to move forward. Such a huge part of our work is just to get to know ourselves better. Since silent screaming often occurs because we didn't feel safe to express ourselves or know how to do it, we have to figure out what it is we're trying to scream about in the first place. I honestly think that lack of knowledge could be feeding into our urge to act in these ways, and also why we might not even know why we're doing it. So let's start there. And then you can journal about how you might want to talk to someone about it or tell them what you're needing and wanting. The second sign, attention-seeking behaviors. Now, I want to preface this by letting you know that attention is a basic human need. It's not wrong to need it or want it, but it's not healthy to act in dramatic or exaggerated ways to get it. And that's what I'm talking about here. Silent screaming in this way would look like exaggerated displays of emotion or dramatic gestures to draw others' attention to our distress without directly asking for help. Like we could be constantly fishing for compliments, pretending that we aren't able to do something so that someone will notice. We could be making deliberately provocative comments, and these could be sexual things, but even just things that we know will agitate someone else. We could also seek out sympathy from others or take over every conversation that we're in and even embellish the stories that we tell. The goal of this type of silent screaming is to make people notice us. And we often don't care if it's positive or negative, as long as we get it. This style can often be influenced early in life by our teachers because we could have been the class clown or even the best student. And both of those behaviors are done as a way of getting attention without knowing how to get connection in other ways. That's how I like to think of attention-seeking behavior, as connection-seeking, because that's what it really is. We want to feel seen, heard, and important. We want to feel connected to other people, and again, that's a basic human need. But because we never received it or don't know how to get it in a healthy way, we engage in these unhealthy attention-seeking behaviors. And the best way to get out of this is to start spending more time alone, getting to know ourselves and our wants and needs. When we find ourselves doing any and everything for attention, it's common that we are always with other people, which doesn't leave much time for self-reflection or personal growth. We could also practice being a good listener or considering what it is that we want in our relationships. And that way, we can give that to them as well. The third sign we are silent screaming, which I know is kind of the opposite of the last one we discussed, is isolating ourselves. Unlike the last sign where I mentioned that spending some time alone to get to know yourself could be helpful, here we withdraw from social situations as a way of signaling distress and eliciting concern from others without explicitly verbalizing our needs. When people reach out and ask to get together, we say no, or we may say that we will and we cancel last minute, or we just don't show up. All as a ploy to get them to be concerned, to reach out to us, and to try to tune in to how we're really doing. Here, our isolation or withdrawal is done as a way of showing them that we're struggling. It's our silent way of expressing our distress, and we just hope that they're attuned enough to pick up on it. I find that when we're acting like this, our goal is to get someone to come over and check up on us, beg us to come out. We usually are social, but we act in this way to signal our upset. And because it's out of character for us, we hope or know that this silent scream will be heard. I remember years ago when I was getting some friends together for a night out, and I just casually asked everyone if they would like to go and if they were free. Most of them were excited, immediately said, yes, let me figure it out, but I'll be there. But one friend said no, which is fine. But a few days before we were getting together, one of our mutual friends reached out and told me that the friend who said no wanted me to ask her again. She apparently didn't think that my initial ask was sincere, and she wanted me to ask again to prove that I really wanted her there. I know, I thought this was pretty wild too, but needless to say, I told our mutual friend that everyone was invited in the same way. And if that wasn't good enough for her, she didn't have to come. I wasn't trying to be mean, but I wasn't going to beg her to come out with us. And she didn't come. This particular sign or way of acting tells me that we really need some support. We want someone to come and sit with us, listen to our struggles, and help us through them. But we don't want to seem needy or like a burden, so we remove ourselves completely. And while this can seem noble, at the time, it can completely backfire on us. People can stop inviting us out. Know that we're just doing this to get attention and not check in on us. If you connect with this sign the most, look back on your past interactions where you helped out and supported those you love. How did they ask you for help? What prompted you to reach out to them? And if that doesn't work, another thing that I do is I'll watch one of my favorite TV shows or movies and see how friends or family ask each other for connection and for help. I love older sitcoms for this. Things like Sex and the City are good, or even Friends. Even The Office has some goofy ways of asking for help. So check those out. Going back to the causes of silent screaming, we often just don't know how to speak up. Getting some ideas of how to start that conversation or what to say can help. And therapy can help with this too. As we become more aware of the ways we think and feel, we can start practicing telling people about it. And what safer place than in therapy with our therapist? Sign number 4, manipulation. This is when we use manipulative tactics such as guilt tripping or playing the victim to coerce others into providing support or attention without directly asking for it. This sign kind of connects with all of the previous signs, but it's important to talk about manipulation as a whole because there are a lot of ways that we can do this without realizing it. Even people-pleasing behavior is considered manipulative because we're trying to get other people to feel good so that we can feel okay. Like if we keep everyone else happy, then we don't feel as anxious. This could also look like us being really nice to one person so that later we can get them to do something for us. We aren't being kind or loving because we feel that way. It's all with the hope of getting them to do something for us later on. And we call this love bombing, and it's often used by people with narcissistic tendencies, but many of us can find ourselves acting like that without realizing it. Another common one is when we lean into any pain, discomfort, or negative thing that's happened to us with the goal of getting people to feel sorry for us. The thing about manipulation is that it can be hard to recognize, which is why for this sign, my tips are really some questions to ask yourself and do your best to answer honestly. Do you mainly do nice things for others with strings attached? Do you get angry or extremely emotional when you don't get your way? Do you secretly enjoy it when people feel bad for you? Are you okay with people doing things for you because they feel guilty? Do you ever make mistakes on purpose? Have you ever used an illness or an injury to get more attention? Do you put other people first because you don't like conflict or seeing others upset? Take some time with this one because manipulation can feel like such a terrible thing, but we all do it in one way or another, and we'll keep doing it if we don't recognize it. Sign number 5 that we're silently screaming in our life is we overshare all the time. This means that we disclose all sorts of personal and painful information early on in our relationships when that sort of confession isn't expected. Remember, our silent screaming is our way of trying to get connection. Therefore, we might hope that by revealing vulnerabilities, we can encourage a deeper and more meaningful conversation. Sometimes we overshare when we're going through challenging times and are seeking understanding or support. Sharing a lot of personal information might be a way for us to express our emotions and find someone who can empathize or provide guidance. I also know that we often aren't fully aware of social boundaries or what's considered appropriate in given context, especially if we have social anxiety or have any struggles in social situations, which goes back to the reasons that we can struggle with silent screaming, because we don't know how to healthily express ourselves. No one taught us, and we're just doing our best to feel connected and supported. The best way to fight back against this sign is to take stock of what you know about your friends and other people that you're in relationships with. And then compare that with what they know about you. If that's too hard and you're like, I don't really remember, maybe just notice the next time you're with them. How much do you share versus what they share with you? Have they not told us anything about their upbringing yet, but they know every detail of ours? Have they seen us cry a ton of times about our struggles, but we don't think we've ever seen them upset? Just pay attention to this. And I know every relationship has ebbs and flows, and sometimes we might need more support and vice versa. So don't think it's always balanced, but instead look at the relationship as a whole. And if you find yourself always sharing too much, tell your therapist about it, or even check out my boundaries workshop, or even my attachment one could help too, because this might be coming from a deeper issue in our life. And you can find all of my workshops on my website. Just go to katiemorton.com. Sign number 6, we pick fights often. I know this one may not seem so silent, but remember, it's more about us not being able to directly talk about what's bothering us. Instead, we do these other things in the hopes that someone will finally see our pain and offer their support. Just like all of the other more anger in types of signs, we can also express this outwardly through picking fights, but it still has the same goal: to get connection, to feel seen and heard. This particular sign could be rooted in a fear of abandonment because we're worried that they're just going to leave us, and so we might strike first. Honestly hoping that they'll then apologize maybe, or see our upset and make it right. Or at the very least, then we know when the pain is going to happen and we don't have to wait around worrying about it. This could also be happening because we have low self-esteem or a history of dysfunctional relationships, leading us to seek validation through negative interactions. Unresolved past trauma and attachment patterns may further contribute to our tendency to create conflict for the sake of connection. And this sign can obviously damage our relationships, not to mention the one we have with ourselves. Because I've heard from so many of my patients over the years that the guilt and shame they feel after picking a fight is almost unbearable. So we have to find our way out of this. And it can help to try to identify our triggers. What sets us off? Can we look back a few days or maybe even weeks and see why it led us here? Can we tolerate the discomfort that will come with being more vulnerable instead of angry? Because remember, anger is a protective emotion. It spines out. It helps us survive and get through. So in order to undo this, we're going to have to sit with the discomfort of showing our soft underbelly. And that can be hard. Therapy might be a good thing to get into for this part, so that we don't feel more injured as we navigate this new way of interacting. We will also want to find some positive coping skills to help when we feel our anger building. Maybe we can write about it, do some physical activity that gets that energy out of our body, or even just venting to a close friend or our therapist about it. But remember to offer yourself some compassion as you work to change the dynamic and gain some insight into your anger. I hope you found this video helpful. If you think I left out any other ways that we silently scream, let me know. I think this is way more common than most people realize. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.